First, I have a nice announcement to make. I've launched a new career, and everybody will join Joyce being real glad about that. I've become a songwriter. Now, here's the first verse of the first song that I've penned. I'm not going to sing it. That's good.
Well, then that's gonna lose
All
some.
right,
You're not singing it.
I'm not going to sing it. I'm just going to. You tell me if you think it works. On the road to worship again. Just can't wait to get to worship again. The life I love is worshiping with my friends, and I can't wait to get to worship again. Unlike a well-known college president that's been in the news recently, I didn't plagiarize. That's all very original. I do love to get to worship again. Every opportunity. All kidding aside, that song struck a chord with me when I was preparing this lesson. We're going to talk about the songs of ascent, Psalms of Ascent tonight, or Songs of Ascent. And I was reminded of that song, On the Road Again. And yes, the thoughts that I had reminded me of that song, but of course the core of what I was thinking, I guess, was entirely different from what Willie Nelson was thinking when he penned that song in 1980. This is dramatically modified, of course. The Songs of Ascent were the songs that the people of Israel sang as they journeyed to Jerusalem 3 times a year. It's a collection of, I think Neil mentioned last week there were 17, I think there's only 15, 120 through 134, I believe it's 15. They were sung 2,000 years ago. Not all of them were written specifically for that purpose, so some of them may have been, but they eventually became collected together, and those folks used them when they journeyed to Jerusalem. We're going to talk about those now tonight, but first of all, everybody knows what ascent means, what it means to ascend or ascend. To go up, yes, to go up. They meant to go up. Now, I thought about this too as we journeyed to church the last several times. It's there are no hills. We just kind of cruise along. But not so. So many people have been in Jerusalem, and it's situated on a hill. And it's not like the hills of Warren County or Allen County. Apparently it's a massive hill, and I'm told it rises some 2,000 feet above the surrounding countryside. Not 2,000 feet above sea level, but 2,000 feet above the surrounding countryside. And I tried to put that in perspective because I just couldn't get a grip on that. I know what 2,000 feet is if you're talking about horizontal, but not going up, especially going up a hill. So I did a little digging, and I found that to get it in perspective, the highest elevation in Warren County is a place called Pilot Knob. Who knows where Pilot Knob is? I've never heard of it. Anybody? Up around Smith's Grove, about 2 miles southwest, I believe, southeast of Smith's Grove. Now, here's the perspective. It is a Pilot Knob, highest place in Warren County, is 955 feet above sea level. Where do you think we are right now? Anybody have any idea?
540.
How many?
500. A little over.
You're pretty close because what I found was I tried to find that out. I looked at different places, and the closest I could come with was the airport, Warren County Regional Airport. You know where they is? What is that? 2 miles as the crow flies, maybe. It's 547 feet above sea level. So that's the difference. 547 feet to Pilot Knob, 955 feet. That's what, 400 feet roughly. Jerusalem surrounds the countryside by an elevation of about 2,000 feet, so it's 5 times. And I think we would not have any problem walking up a hill like going from airport to Pilot Knob, but 2,000 feet, and then we're not talking about a small hill, we're talking about a big hill. The city of Jerusalem is quite large, and so the hill had to have been a great long slope, so it had to wear people out, it had to get them weary. And of course, they were traveling in what I'll call caravans. We know from reading the story of Jesus being left behind as a boy, that there were, they traveled in groups, large groups, family groups, and people that lived close together, I guess. So it was an artist's journey. We also know that these Psalms were written, these Psalms of Ascent, now remember there's 15 of them, 120 through 134, were written by at least 3 authors, or 3+ authors. Hezekiah, David, Solomon, and then 3 of them were among the unknown authors. I believe there were 42 of the Psalms written by unknown authors. But you got a pretty good cross-reference there. If I remember right, from what Neil told us 2 or 3 weeks ago, there are 8 known authors of the Psalms, and then unknown could add, who knows how many more, if there are 42 of those, but at least 8 known. Anybody want to tell me who the others are right quickly? Can you think of any of them? Moses is one of them. Moses only wrote 1, and there were 2 other, according to my notes, there were 2 other writers that only wrote 1 psalm. Anybody know who they are? Asaph wrote 12. There's an Ethan, and there's some information about him in Psalms 89, or in my commentary about Psalms number 89. There's a writer called Heman. He wrote 88, and then Moses wrote 90. The sons of Korah wrote 11. Asaph wrote 12. Solomon wrote either 1 or 2. There's some debate of that. Hezekiah wrote 9. David wrote 75. So here we've got a good representation. Hezekiah wrote 7 of these, which is 7 of the 9 he wrote. And they were all sung at one time or another during that long journey to Jerusalem. A couple other things about them. The foundation, and I think everybody knows this, so we're not going to dwell on it a lot, but if you need to review it, it's Deuteronomy 16, verses 16 and 17, where the discussion between God and Moses has to do with 3 times a year, you're going to go to my city, and he later describes what that city is, and participate in the feast. And there's lots of discussion on that, which we won't get into tonight. A couple of other things about the Psalms of Ascent. They focus on returning home. You know, Neil likes to, in his lessons, he likes to drill down on a psalm and dissect it every which way. And I tried that and looking at some of these Psalms of Ascent, but some of them are pretty short. 3 or 4 of them only have 3 verses. There's only 101 verses, and all of them put together. It's an average of about 6 apiece. And so I thought, when I started studying this, what I'm going to try to do is break them into 2 parts. For one thing, I didn't think I could cover all 15 of them in one class, so I kind of broke it in the middle. And I said, I'm going to take this first section here, and I'm going to read those together and study those together as if they were one psalm, and see if I can take some of these ideas that Neil has given us and try to apply that logic or that analysis to study those psalms. And that helped a little bit. The recurring thought, though, is clearly a focus on returning home, dwelling with God, even if only for a short period of time. Now, you don't see that, at least I didn't see it, specifically mentioned in all of these, although it is in some. But, of course, we have the advantage of knowing that these Psalms were sung by those people returning, so we have the ability of hindsight. We can look back and see that. We know what they used these for, and when you look at all of them together, you can certainly see this focus a little more clearly than maybe if you can on 1 or 2, especially these short ones. There are multiple references to Zion or Jerusalem, and I counted today, and I don't remember. I tried to do the Neil thing of counting Zion or Jerusalem, how many times Lord is repeated in all of these. And you can find some patterns in that, but the patterns, I think, are a little easier to find by looking at all of them together. Okay, helpful messages are in 101 verses, and I want us to look, starting tonight, with what is a key verse, or what are the key verses for each of these, the 7 I believe we're going to look at tonight. And is there a main theme or a particular message that each of these give us? And as we study these, you're going to see on the next slide, I think, I've used a title for each of the Psalms. I did plagiarize that. I lifted that from the headings in my Bible. So if some of you are using the same Bible that I'm using, these will resonate with you. Let's start with Psalms 120. A plea for relief from bitter coals. And I'm gonna read most of these, except there's only a couple places that I'll ask somebody else to read. Psalms 120. The writer says, "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. Deliver me, O Lord, from lying lips, from a deceitful tongue. What shall be given to you, and what more shall be done to you, you deceitful tongue? The warrior's sharp arrows with glowing coals of the broom tree? Woe to me that I sojourn in Meshach, that I dwell among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I had my dwelling among those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war." A couple points of clarification. In verse 5, Meshach and Kedar are either random pagan people or perhaps pagan cities. And so he says, "Woe to me that I'm journeying in that place, that I sojourn there, that I am from there." That's a problem. Burning coals, he talks about that or glowing coals of the broom tree. The broom tree is another name for the juniper tree. And I didn't know this until a couple of days ago. When that wood is burned, it burns with an intense fire, and it burns for a long, long time. So you can see the point that the writer is making. A warrior, sharp arrows, that's not something anybody would want to absorb. Being amidst glowing coals of that juniper tree also would be something that we would want to avoid. And the writer says, what's going to be given to them? What more should be done to you, you deceitful tongue? He's talking about deceitful tongue, and that's pretty easy to understand. He's talking about liars, people that lie. The author is Hezekiah here. I look at verses 1 and 6 separately as key verses. When I do key verses, and I try to do this elsewhere in the Bible, and for some of the writings, especially, well, I start to say especially the New Testament, but not necessarily New Testament, it's hard to find a key verse in some of the chapters because there are too many key verses. It's a little easier here, but still in 120 I found two. "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me." So I ask myself, when I feel distressed about any particular thing, do I call upon the Lord, expecting him to answer me? And then in verse 6, "Too long have I had my dwelling among those who hate peace." We live in a troubled time, and being present in an environment, an area where people speak with a forked tongue was not an uncommon thing in that day, and it's not an uncommon thing today. And it's one of the things, as Joyce will tell you, it gets under my skin pretty quickly. If I see somebody that I know is caught in a lie, and what do they do to try to get out of the lie? They tell another lie, yeah, which sometimes is even more obvious. And that gets all over me. I don't like it at all, and I don't know anything that we can do about that. But the problem with it, as the psalmist sees it, is that when we're in the company of people that are prone to be liars, it affects us. It sometimes causes us grief and heartache because the lies are told about us or told of us. And so the psalmist says, "I'm distressed about this, and I'm calling to the Lord, and he's answering me with respect to this." Look at verse 5. It starts out with, "Woe to me." Why this woe? What does that imply? Woe to me. What's the word woe mean when I say woe to me? What is it?
Self-pity.
Say it again.
Is it self-pity or
It's grief, self-grief, extreme grief. Yeah, woe to me. I can't hardly stand it. It shows the intensity that he's dealing with here, especially the intensity of anguish. He's terribly wrapped up in anguish about this. I don't know. At least I can't think of any instances when I've been in the company of liars when it's had any impact on my faith. Maybe it has. Maybe it's been some threat to my faith that I overcame. But I take the position of the psalmist here. I look at the purpose of this, the theme or message. He's saying, God, I know you're present, and God's always been present. He's always been faithful. He'll be faithful today, and he'll be faithful tomorrow. And look at the time here. I can understand the faithfulness of God. I think, in some respects, better than the people of that day, because all they had was what they knew about God behind them. Well, I know that too. And then I know what they didn't know about God from that point on, especially up until the time of Christ, and then certainly after that. We've got so much more to let us understand fully that God does provide relief. He helps us in periods of distress, and He's always been faithful. There are no examples in the Bible where the faithfulness of God comes into question. None at all. So I'm going to ask ourselves this question is, how close is God to us today? Is He close enough that we can, like the psalmist says, call to the Lord? Now, I've said on the slide, think about that. What if I say, how close is God to me? What do I really need to be saying? Yeah. And where do I get that idea? Where's it fully explained to me? Who says something about that in the New Testament? Write something about that. James. What does James say? Starts with draw. You draw near to God and He'll do what? You draw near to us, yeah. You draw near to God. So I think I understand a little bit more about what to do when I'm affected by the people around me, not my brothers and sisters in the Lord, not the church family, but by the people that I interact with that might not have the same frame of reference that I do. The psalmist Ezekiel says, I called to the Lord in my distress. He answered me, and for too long I dwelt among people who hate peace, the peace of God. Okay, any questions on that? We're going to move quickly now. Let's look at 121, Psalms 121. I'm going to ask somebody that has available the King James Version, the original King James Version. Somebody got that? I guess that broadcast your voice pretty good. Did everyone read that? Kevin, you got it? Go, please.
The Song of Degrees. I will lift up mine eyes into the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore.
All right. This song is another Hezekiah song, and I began to pick two key verses. I'm looking at that first one. I'm reading from, I think it's a New ESV version. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. Let's stop right there with that first key verse, the first two key verses. You might notice a difference in what Kevin read from in the King James Version and what I read. Might notice a difference. Those of you who don't have the King James Version, what's the punctuation at the end of verse 1? What? Question mark. Kevin, what was it in King James?
Period.
Yeah, period. Okay. Now, I bring that up to bring this up. I say on the slide that those verses were often misused by a venerable coach. Who knows what I'm talking about other than Neil? Yeah, I've talked to him about who knows what I'm talking about. Well, the venerable coach Adolph Rupp, and most of us are old enough to remember him, on more than one occasion, I'm told that he would say, especially when they were graduating seniors, he was losing good players. Coach, what are you going to do next year? And he would say, I will lift up my eyes and look into the hills from whence cometh my salvation. Period. Now, of course, what was he referring to? Coach Rupp. Or what hills was he looking up to? The hills of Eastern Kentucky. That's where he got all those good players, with the baskets hanging on the side of the barns. However, that's a misuse of the verse, because here's and we put a question mark there, which all of your translations do. From where does my help come? Question mark. That makes it a little more understandable in at least the way the psalmist wanted to write that. One commentary I read about it that said that to not have a question mark there misusing it, because you got to understand the context. These people were going up the hill, if you will, going to Jerusalem, surrounded by the hillsides, and that they could see that. But their thought was, gee whiz, I look into the hills, but from where do I really get my help? Now, in context, remember, Jerusalem is sitting on top of this hill. It's a fortified city. It's well defendable and well defended at the time, at least. But he looks to the hills and he says, from where do I really get my help? Where does Jerusalem get its help? Jerusalem not being the city, but Jerusalem being the people of God. Where do we get our help? From God. Yeah, from God. So he's really saying it, and this commentary writer, I like the way he said it. He went on to say, this is really not a translation, don't get me wrong, but he said, here's the way it would probably be written today with what we know. I look to the mountains. Does my strength come from the mountains? Rhetorical question, the answer which would be no. My strength comes from God, who made heaven and earth and mountains. So he recognized, the psalmist did, that the strength of Jerusalem, the people, came not from the surrounding area, the mountains and the fortifications that were there, but from God himself. Look at verses 7a and 8. I'm going to split this up. The first half of verse 7, then all of verse 8. The Lord will keep you from all evil. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. That too, I think, is a key verse. That's if you will, though condensed, it's a complete commentary or complete statement on what God has done for us, what He's created. And I've been to some of these places, and some of you others have been to other places, but have you ever looked when you're in the Smokies or at the foot of the Rockies, or looking out the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean or in the Gulf, or any of the other, what I call wonders of the world? Have you ever looked at that and you said, my, God created this. God created this. And we're only scratching the surface if we're staying in the continental United States. Barely scratching the surface. It's absolutely amazing. And then when you go to some of these places, I've seen it in a couple of places where they have these displays of the human body and how it works. It's like see-through. You see all the systems of the human body, and you think, God created that. The God we serve created the mountains. He created the lakes and the rivers. How awesome is our God? How important is it for us to recognize that the God of the universe, our God, our Heavenly Father, is able to do that. And we think He can't answer our prayers? Let's don't be foolish. Let's get on our knees and let's pray with the fervence that James and other writers tell us that we should use when we're approaching God's throne. I lift up my eyes to the hills from which cometh my salvation. Joyful praise for what God has created is, I think, the theme or the message in this psalm. We go on. Any questions before we go on? Psalm 122. I want to read that to speed us up a little bit, please. Psalm 122, the joy of going to the house of the Lord. I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet have been standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem, built as a city that is bound firmly together, which the tribes go up. The tribes of the Lord have a decree for Israel to give thanks to the name of the Lord. There thrones for judgment were set, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they be secure who love you. Peace be within your walls, and security within your towers. For my brothers and companions' sake, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will speak good. internal peace, peace within the house of God. This is a psalm of David. I picked verse 1 as the key verse. I will be glad when they say to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. I think sometimes I'm as guilty as anybody ever has been when I don't consciously have that thought when I'm on my way to this building to participate in activities such as tonight. I believe subconsciously I'm not guilty of gross neglect of that, but I am reminded by Psalms 122 that it's something for which we need to be glad. We're gathering with God's people. Is there any assembly we could gather in that would be more pleasing and more joyful than when we're in God's house? I'm not talking about a physical building. I'm talking about assembled in Jerusalem. Today's Jerusalem is the family of God gathered together. So let's be glad when we come. The psalmist is making some other points, though. It's not just that. I think he's saying that when we get there, that's when our joy is complete, when we're sharing with others. No other event compares to that. No other citizenship. Some of us are members of Citizens Club, civic clubs rather. I'm a member of three professional organizations. I've been in lots of meetings with several hundred people or a few people, but I can't let that dominate my thoughts. I let assembling with God's people dominate my thoughts, even when I'm in those kind of meetings. I want to dwell on something here. Look at it. Here's a question that maybe you don't see it the way I do, but what verse makes us see beyond Jerusalem's physical beauty of that day, but have the same feeling of joy? These people now, they're thinking of Jerusalem, the city that is bound firmly together, that is well built. The structure of it was impeccable to a large degree at least. But what verse makes you see beyond that? Say, I've kind of got that coupled with the one right after it. Mary Lloyd says 6. I'm thinking about 7, but really 6 is that introduces 7. Peace be within your walls. Peace be within your walls. If the psalmist David were to say to us today, peace be within your walls, what's he really saying? What?
Among your numbers.
Among your numbers. Peace be in the brotherhood. Peace be in your walls. He also says security within your towers. It's a little harder to nail down, but I get that as we're secure from any outside influence that would keep us from doing what our commission is, that is to seek and save the lost. So let's have internal peace, and then we'll have a greater sense of security in what we're trying to do. No hindrances to what we need to do. This is God's desire. How do I know from the New Testament that it's God's desire for there to be peace and harmony within the brotherhood? How do I know? Where in the Bible, which one of the Gospels says something about that? I'm thinking of one chapter in one Gospel that is entirely, I believe, except maybe for the first few verses, but entirely the words of Jesus. John what? John 17. In John 17, it's the last 7, 8, or 9 verses maybe of John 17 where Jesus is praying for us. He was praying for those who come after him. And that would be the ones that came immediately after him, like on the day of Pentecost. But that extends on down to us too. Peace be within your walls. That's God's desire for us. Okay, any questions before we march on? We've got 14 more there here. Okay, Psalms 123. Prayer for relief from contempt. I found this one a little difficult because it's something we haven't experienced too much. Psalms 123. To you I lift up my eyes, O you who are enthroned in the heavens. Behold, as the eyes of servants look to the hand of their master, as the eyes of a maidservant to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God, for he has mercy on us, Have mercy on us, O Lord, have mercy on us. For we have had enough, more than enough of contempt. Our soul has had more than enough of the scorn of those who are at ease, of the contempt of the proud. The scorn of those who are at ease, the contempt of the proud. Hezekiah is author here. I lock in on verse 2b. So our eyes look to the Lord our God till he has mercy on us. This psalm has to do with the people that were experiencing to some degree and at some point in time or period of time, I'm not sure how long, but they had experienced scorn, contempt directed at them. You're going to Jerusalem to worship who? To do what? And you're taking this whole group with you? That seems like a foolish thing to do. And I ask myself, do we ever get those comments thrown back at us? People subtly maybe, and maybe not with an adverse tone, but sometimes people don't understand the great desire that we either have or should have to assemble and worship God. I don't mind telling people that are sitting next to us that we're not coming to next Wednesday night's ball game because we go to church on Wednesday night. I don't mind that. That doesn't bother me at all. Joyce and I got over that a long time ago. They scheduled games on Wednesday night. And, you know, we paid more per seat, I guess, for the tickets that we got. It's just something that we have to deal with. This is also a song of lament, by the way. Those lament songs, sorrow, great sorrow expressed. Relief from contempt is what he's asking for. Here's the thing: be patient. Be patient in all this. God's mercy is coming. It's just down the road. Our response to any measure of scorn is just be patient and make an appeal or a petition to God for help, just like these people made a petition. They wrote a song. They sung it as a song. What is our appeal or petition? We're not songwriters, most of us at least. What's our appeal? How do we appeal to God? We pray. Yeah, the effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Somebody one time said something to me, and that's a little of a contradiction in the Bible, because wasn't it Paul that said there's nobody righteous? Well, Paul is really kicking back to one of the earlier Psalms. That's where he gets that idea. But the whole concept of the Bible, the whole story of the Bible is, yes, I am not righteous, you're not righteous, but who is righteous to the extreme? Who is righteous? It's Jesus Christ. He's our righteousness. And if we obey Jesus, if we follow his examples, do the things that we're asked to do in the New Testament, then we claim his righteousness. So yes, there's nobody righteous, no, not one. But we lean on the righteousness of Jesus. Scorn means nothing to us. Let it just roll off your back like my band-aid falls off the back of my head. It just happens. It will not stick. Okay. I had to ask this question because the thought came to mind as I was looking at this psalm. Where in the Old Testament? It's an easy question. You guys are all scholars. Where in the Old Testament, except for Neil, I want you to answer this. Where in the Old Testament do we see scorn to the nth degree directed at God's people? Scorn to the highest degree. People were doing something and the people around them said, "You're idiots," or something to that effect. I heard the magic N word. What was it? Nehemiah. Remember when Nehemiah was starting that project of rebuilding Jerusalem? And those three scoundrels came up, and what was the first thing they did? They didn't attack them with picks and shovels. What did they say? What did they say? You're idiots. You can't do this. You know, they ridiculed them. They scorned them. They got all over them. Sanballat was the leader of that pack, I guess. And then what did they do later on? A couple of verses later, when that construction project starts to get some headway and they're making progress, what do you do then?
They insult. They say if I
Insulted?
something, it'll fall over.
Yep. And they basically kicked it up a notch. It wasn't just verbal attacks. It was, we're gonna do something about it. But we know how that worked out. We know that didn't work. I want us to go, and I don't know, somewhere when I was preparing this, either the thought occurred to me or I read something that sent me over to 2 Corinthians 3. And if you want to flip over there right quick, I got to say this about the writing of Paul in 2 Corinthians 3. Paul, in verse 18, I believe it is, writes, "We all with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord who is in the Spirit." We can make lots of lessons about, he's talking about the unveiled face. But what I see in this, as it relates to Psalms 123, is people of that day, and us today, if we're focused on it, we see the glory of God. We can see the glory of God just like they saw the walls of Jerusalem as they got closer and closer to it. Now, how do we see the face of God? How do we do it? Is it through these eyes? Just through the eyes of faith. Just through the eyes of faith. Yeah. I think Paul is saying that when we're looking at God through the eyes of faith, that the Spirit transforms us into the likeness of Jesus. Paul told the Jews that when they considered the Scriptures, the Old Testament law, it was like it had a veil on it. And we all know what happened to that veil, don't we? That physical veil, we know what happened to it. But he's saying that your view of God was hidden through that veil. And that veil also covered your hearts. The true meaning of those Scriptures is no longer hidden. Now, the people of the time when Hezekiah wrote this psalm didn't know that as fully as we know it, but I said earlier, we look back, we've got more evidence, more information than they have. And that veil between God and us, if it ever was present, it's not present for us. The physical veil was ripped apart when? At what point in time? When? Crucifixion, right? Yeah. It was ripped apart. I'm reminded of that song. I'm not going to sing. But it's one of the most beautiful songs that we'll ever sing. Oh, I long to see him, look upon his face. I long to see Jesus. I long to see God. I long to look upon their face. But I know what I got to do to make that happen. Okay, did I hear Bell?
Yeah.
I'm going to think my okay, we'll pick up with 120. Second bell.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll pick up with 124 next week, and we're going through 130. So, read 124. All right. Thank you for your attention.